I'm Michael. This is Maker's Workshop. We recently got this big industrial size laser, and I thought that it'd be fun to max out the bed and take advantage of the 150 watt laser tube and build some full size desks out of 1/2-inch plywood. The project is also going to incorporate a resin pour, some light traditional woodworking, and I think they're going to be pretty great. Let's get started. I started by sketching out what I had envisioned on the whiteboard. The design would consist of two opposing but otherwise identical towers with two long narrow sections connecting the two down the middle. Then, I spent some time in Illustrator putting together the pattern for each side. I don't know what I should say. Alright, so because the walnut plywood is pretty pricey, we're going to do a couple test cuts first on some birch so we can figure out our cut settings and make sure that our joints are going to work as planned. That's all I had to say for that part. Sarah chimed in and wanted to help because if the draft worked, she decided she wanted to finish it and make it her new school desk. I dialed in the settings I wanted to get through the 1/2-inch plywood with as little charring as possible and then went for it. One of the reasons I wanted to tackle this build in the first place was to really push the Laguna laser to its fullest potential. It handled the 1/2-inch of plywood incredibly well, but it did take some time. After letting it do its thing, the pieces looked fantastic and fit together perfectly. So I went ahead and dove right into cutting my pattern out of walnut plywood. Alright, so now we have all of our pieces cut. In theory, since we did a test piece, everything will fit, but now it's time to go find out and test that. Quiet on set! Quiet on set! Okay. I'm gonna talk about this. Alright. At this point we have all of our pieces laser cut, and one of the characteristics of laser cutting is that the edges get a bit charred because the laser is literally burning through the wood to cut it. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to just clean all the edges with a rag and paint thinner to make it so that we don't get sooty fingerprints all over everything. Let's go! I wanted to leave a blackened edge so the finished piece would look laser cut, but there was definitely a lot of excess char. All the pieces are cleaned and I have it laid out in the orientation that's going to glue up. And so we're just going to add some glue and put this tower together and go from there. I'm using Type-On 3 for this and was sure to coat all the tabs and every spot of contact for a strong bond when the sides slip together. This really did go together remarkably well. This is my first piece of laser cut furniture and I was fully expecting this to throw more curveballs my way. I'm not complaining or anything, but genuinely, this was just a really seamless process for me to assemble. I used band clamps to keep pressure on the joints, and then threw on some extra clamps for good measure on the base of the tower. That's one tower done, and now we're going to glue up the second tower. And then the second tower went together the exact same way. It's just a mirror image of the first one. I took some time to wipe away the glue squeeze out before leaving these overnight. So, it's been sitting for a day. We're going to take the clamps off and then we're going to glue the two towers together with the cross supports and let that dry. They're big excited for all the desks. I got the cross supports in place with some more wood glue, and at this point it was really starting to look like a desk. To keep this square, because it was a pretty delicate joint, I clamped a square directly into the corners and then added as many clamps as I could find. An easier way to do this would probably be to just use a corner clamp. Alright, let's unclamp it and see if it is still square. Not all. It's a delicate joint, but the top will finish tying it together and then it will be perfect. Hi. I had some walnut slabs picked out for the top of the desk. I wanted a resin river down the middle to really showcase the natural curve of the wood. I marked where I needed to trim this down to fit the base of the desk and then cut it with my jigsaw. To get a straight edge on the exterior, I ran each of these through the table saw. For the birch plywood desk base, Sarah picked out a maple slab. Brooke and I prepped the slab first by straightening off the edges and then pulling the bark off. It was exciting to work with these particular slabs because they came from very local trees that needed to come down about a year ago. We milled them and dried them ourselves. The laser cut shell needed something for the drawer slides to hold onto. Back at the laser cutter, I had also cut a series of strips for each desk. Using wood glue and CA glue together and a level as a guide, we put a stack of 2 of these in each spot that would begin in a drawer slide. And then, with the help of a drawer slide jig, I screwed all the drawer slides into place. I installed 36 drawer slides total between the 2 desks. We're going to start making our mold for the resin pour, and to do that, I'm just going to coat these pieces of chipboard with Tyvek tape so the resin won't stick to it. Okay. In addition to the chipboard, I also covered 2 pieces of pine in the Tyvek tape and then positioned the 2 pieces of wood exactly how I wanted them. Alright, so now that I have these positioned the way that I want them, I'm just going to screw these pieces of wood onto each end so we can then rotate the top and put the chipboard pieces on what's going to be the underside of the desk. The walnut was quite heavy and I wasn't sure if the 2 wooded panels would feel quite sturdy enough, but it was solid as a rock. To make sure that this doesn't leak, we're going to do a couple of precautionary things, and the first one is we're going to go down the edge of this bottom flap and we're just going to adhere it to the wood with a bead of hot glue. I put the hot glue on the high points of the wood to make for easier sanding off later. To keep this resin proof, it's also important not to leave a single hole and also be pretty heavy-handed with the hot glue. Alright, we'll let that set up a little bit and then we will do the same thing to the other one and then we will do our first pour.
Should we put like plastic down on the floor just in case?
No.
High risk.
I think it'll be fine. Alright, so right now we're mixing up some 2-to-1 high performance epoxy by Total Boat. And we're going to use this to paint it on the edges, and we're going to let it pool at the bottom of the edges to start to seal the mold. When we go to pour the thick set, since it's going to be about 2 inches thick, there's going to be a lot of resin there, and we don't want that to go dumping out onto the floor. Not that that has ever or will ever happen here at Maker's Workshop. Major mold failure! Take that side! Help! But I hear that it's a common problem that people run into. Hey Siri, how much time is left on my timer? Oh man. I hear it! Can you hear it?
Yeah, it's not in your AirPod.
Total Boat 2-to-1 medium hardener is perfect for sealing off the edges of the slabs and filling cracks before the big resin pour because it stays nice and thick, gives a good amount of working time, but still hardens relatively quickly. I used a foam brush to scoot this around into the corners of the mold and under the slabs. After sealing things off with the clear resin, I started putting together the first thin pour for each. So to color it, I'm just using a activated charcoal powder, and I'm going to be fairly generous with it.
That's a lot.
It's generous. This layer tests the seal with a low stakes amount of resin. Alright, time to pour. But also affords me the opportunity to test out colors because I didn't plane my slabs ahead of time, and I was pretty sure this layer would end up completely planed off in the end anyway. In addition to the charcoal in the Walnut River, Sarah selected some bright blue pigment to put in the resin in the maple desktop. If anything leaks out at this point, it's going to be a manageable amount and it won't make us cry. It also serves to fill any leaks if there is a spot where it leaks as it sets up, which means that when we do our bigger pour, it won't dump all over the floor. I let this sit and confirmed that it was completely hardened the next day so we could go in with the big pours using Total Boat Thick Set. For the walnut tabletop, we decided to go with a much more transparent charcoal color. With a touch of silver mica, this would show off the edge of the walnut really well. These took a few pours each to fully fill. The thick set is great for this type of thing because it can handle up to a 2-inch depth without an issue. We gave these a couple of days to fully set for good measure and ended up with only one tiny spill over on the walnut desktop. I demolded this using just my impact driver and utility knife to cut the hot glue. Chipboard is my go-to for resin molds because its flexibility makes unmolding as easy as it gets. This was a pretty fun step because I could start to envision exactly how the finished desks were going to look. But there was still a lot of work to do. I trimmed off as much hot glue as possible using a utility knife to avoid gumming up my power tools. I used a hand power planer to handle the high points quickly and efficiently on each panel before sending them through the drum sander to level them off. I measured and marked on each desktop exactly where I wanted to square off the edges to fit the desk bases, and then used my jigsaw to handle the cut. After taking a look at these on top of their bases, we decided on a beveled edge for both of them. I went ahead and added that on the router table. Even though the tabletops were really starting to take shape, they still needed to be finished. Brooke filled in a couple of holes that cropped up in the pieces and got everything up to a 220 grit. The key with getting resin to look great is not skimping on the sanding. Then, Brooke wiped off the dust with some paint thinner. This finish is Osmo in a clear satin. It's our go-to for finishing resin river pieces. It dries down to a velvety finish, which is perfect over the top of something busy like these two desktops. Osmo takes about 3 very thin coats in my experience, and the best looking result comes when you really wipe off every last bit of excess between coats. The next order of business was drawer fronts. I started running slabs through the planer to prep them for the bandsaw. If you wanted to keep this project 100% laser cut, you could easily cut the tops out of plywood as well. Using my bandsaw, I resawed each slab smack down the middle. I want to keep these as thick as possible. Alright, so that went about as seamlessly as possible. This was the one I was the most nervous about because it's the only one that's wide enough to get the wide drawer faces for the bottom drawers out of. But everything went great, and this is going to work out just fine. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the individual panels for the drawer faces, and then we will resin the bug tracks and route the edges, sand them down, make them look pretty, and then it'll be done. I sketched with pencil on the side of each panel before passing them through the jointer. This makes it easy to know when I've completely flapped because the pencil is all gone. Then, using a jigsaw, I made sure I had a nice square edge to rest against the fence of my table saw. I measured each drawer opening and then cut the maple down to appropriately sized drawer faces. There were 9 per desk and 2 desks, so it was a lot of drawer faces. I filled any cracks or holes with Total Boat 2-to-1 resin and then drum sanded the drawer faces to quickly smooth them off. My drum sander left some scorch marks on the 11th hour, but these could easily be sanded off with the last finishing sand. To tie things together, I beveled off all the drawer fronts on the router table, and then Brooke sanded the bevels too. The drawer fronts also were finished with Osmo. This local maple has really incredible character. It was a lot of fun to apply finish to and watch each drawer front pop. Once the finish on the drawer fronts was completely set, it was time for final assembly. I didn't show it, but I also laser cut the drawers out of coordinating plywood and glued those together off camera. To attach the desktops, I'm using corner brackets. To get these positioned properly, I use a piece of scrap wood while screwing them into place to ensure they're lined up properly with the top of the desk base. I also added metal corner braces to that very narrow joint as a precaution while I had the desk opened up for good measure. Then it was time to get all the drawers into place. I used my Craig drawer slide jigs again here, which really helped the process go as smoothly as possible. Which I really appreciated since it was 18 drawers in total between the two desks. I used 1/8" plywood to help me space out my drawer fronts and used a nail gun to tack them into place. It's not a super tight hold, but it keeps them in place just well enough to get the drawer pulls installed. The drawer pulls plus the brads together make a nice and secure combo for these. And then they were done. So overall, the desk came out great. The laser cutter definitely made it a lot easier than if I needed to do all that joinery myself by hand. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click that subscribe button, smash the like button. Did I do that right, or is that the wrong things?
I think you're supposed to say smash the like.
The like, right? Not
Yeah.
smash the subscribe.
I'm not really sure.
If you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button, smash the like button, and then click the notification bell. I'm gonna make more full-size furniture on that big laser, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, I'm Michael. This is Maker's Workshop. Bye.